You may not like it, but this is what perfection looks like. Behold, my final endgame optimized cargo ships. Optimized around what, you might ask? The answer is everything. UPS more than anything else, because these ships are meant to be used with endgame megabasing, where that is ultimately the only thing that matters, but we have also tried to use as little material as possible, have them as compact as possible, and also have them be as easily expandable as possible. Now, the first question that people are going to ask, that we're going to preempt, is about the engine design. You may notice that these two have a bit of an unusual engine design. In order to understand why it has this kind of engine design, you need to understand the concept of non-engined width. Due to the way the speed equation works in Factorio, in order to have a ship going as fast as possible, not only do you need to have legendary thrusters and keep them fully fed at all times, but you need to minimize a variable that we call non-engine width, which abbreviates to new, which is terrible, so we just say the whole thing out every single time. Non-engine width refers to how many tiles of width you have on the ship that are not spanned by engines. As you can see on these ships, they only have one tile of non-engined width. The entire rest of the width of the ship is covered by engines. This one has the pipe down the side, and on this one it became a little more convenient to run it down the middle here. By having this little amount of non-engined width, only one tile, these ships achieve a top speed of 516 kilometers a second, which is very fast for ships that don't involve thruster stacking. If you don't have it spanning the full width, you get a slightly less top speed, such as on this ship here, which is a slightly older design. It may look a bit nicer, but unfortunately, it's less efficient, so it's obsolete. And this has two tiles of non-engined width, one here and one here. You can tell this to start moving, and obviously this is a bigger ship, so it's going to be a slower speed. But even if it was the same size, it would not top out at 516 kilometers a second, because it has two tiles of non-engined width. So that's where these diagonal engine layouts really shine, is you only get one tile of non-engined width, and therefore the highest possible speed. We have this version here, which is the a kilo reaching version, which uses rocket turrets and guns, and very few lasers, only two here. And then we have the laser version here. I've been calling, the final Tachi and the final Tynan, but everyone just calls this the laser Tachi, so I've clearly failed in that department. And this one is meant for non-a-kilo routes, so anything that is just between the inner planets. And you use this one if you need to go to kilo, and only if you need to use a kilo. This one is a bit more UPS efficient than this one. Now you're probably wondering, why not make a laser ship that can reach a kilo? Well, I did experiment with that, and it's somewhere around here. Here, this one. This technically does work to get to a kilo. It's probably still a little shy on laser turrets, even with 90, but one thing I quickly discovered in testing was that it's actually less UPS efficient than just using rockets. It turns out, you would think like having no belts and less inserters would mean more UPS efficiency, but it turns out having something like 90 laser turrets always fire at every single big asteroid that comes by, and having to track that for, a quarter second or so is way more UPS intensive than a single rocket turret simply firing one rocket. The laser version is completely beltless as well. It uses pure direct insert everywhere possible. I mean, the crushers only really need to feed the fuel generation section, so it winds up being relatively simple. Although it did take quite a bit of time to get to this exact layout, but overall the idea is relatively simple. We only grab off one side. This was something that I know is going to really bother people who really enjoy symmetry, but it actually turns out that's all you really need when you're at endgame and you have high levels of research, asteroid productivity. You need very few grabbers, and we simply set one grabber for each asteroid type so we can get a nice buffer going of each one, which means we don't have to worry about any kind of variance, or if the ship happens to idle at a planet for a while, those buffers will last a very, very long time. Both these ships require relatively high research levels. The laser ship requires level 26 of laser to consistently make it around the inner planets at this level of speed without taking damage. I've tested that, and even going to 25, it still gets scratched a bit. So yeah, you really want 26, which is fairly late game. There's a reason I'm calling these my final end game. These ships are really, really meant for late, ultra late game, when you're deep into mega basing and are just looking to optimize around everything you can possibly can, especially, again, UPS. Yeah, 26 for the lasers for this one. For this one, you need 23 for the rockets. Probably something similar to that for the turrets. I didn't really bother testing the fizz as much as the rockets, so that could probably get away with a bit less. But 23 on both is safe. Otherwise, it will, again, get scratched, having this few amount of rocket turrets. You need 23, so you hit the threshold for a yellow rocket to one-shot a big asteroid. 23 explosive is also the threshold you need for red rockets to always two-shot big asteroids, regardless of the splash, which is highly relevant for your Prometheum ship design. So yeah, 23 is a very, very important explosive research level, and is the one you should memorize, as always trying to reach ASAP anytime you start a new game, because it will make your ships a lot more efficient and let you design ships using a lot less rocket turrets and a much smaller footprint. If you do not have these levels of research, you could potentially, especially on the laser one, add more turrets, but I probably would just hold off and use some of the older models, such as the standard Tachi. I've already got a video out on that. This one, which is this one over here, the older one with a lot more turrets, until you get the research high enough to switch to these final designs. These are very easy to expand. That was a core design goal, was that you'd be able to expand cargo very easily. And if you've been watching my past videos or streams, you've noticed that, you know, I always just expand my ships vertically upward. It's the easiest way to handle things, with the hub at the back and then just pushing everything forward. And we can show some examples of those. We've got this right here is an example of the laser one. This is a slightly older model, which, you know, has not the diagonal layout. It needs to be updated, but I've been lazy. It looks a bit nicer, but yeah, as I said earlier, it's a little bit slower. But yeah, you just keep extending the cargo bays forward. Just move the front lasers up. You only need 6 cargo bays replaced with lasers with that level of research. And yeah, once you get the ship once the ship is sufficiently long, you do need to add some middle laser turrets. These don't have to be exact. I think this is, you know, like 12 or so cargo bays between those two, and then I think it was like something like 15, 13 between those two. It doesn't really need to be exact, but, you know, just look at the laser radius, and you need to make sure that it's covered there so that it doesn't take chip damage if it's idling at a planet for too long. As far as the other ship, the explosive ship, to expand that one, it's essentially the same concept. The belt just runs up the side. And we can look at this one here, which is the updated version that, again, has a much longer cargo bay. This is my cryogenic science ship, which hauls 1 million plus cryogenic science at a time, and it's been chugging along just fine. You could, if you don't have the same level of research, just add a lot more lasers, you know, remove a lot more cargo bays and add more. There's kind of a limit to how much you can do that, though, because once the lasers get too far back, the ones in the back won't be able to shoot the front quickly enough. And you do want to have them somewhat in the center and not extending all the way to the side, so you minimize how much time they shoot the side asteroids. But yeah, I would generally shoot for 26. You know, maybe you can remove 3 cargo bays and get this working at around 23, 22 or something like that. But I haven't specifically tested it at those levels. I mainly tested to see what the minimum level it would need for the standard design, which was definitely 26 and not any less than that. So the last thing we need to talk about with these two ships is that because they use only side grabbers on one side, so we're not grabbing from the front or the left side, we have starboard grabbers only, they can take a while to start up, especially if you happen to build them over Novice. By the way, I don't recommend ever putting your shipyard over Novice. I had my shipyard over Falgora in this planet, which is still better than Novice. I'll be moving it to Volcanus in my next run for a number of reasons. It wound up on this in Fulgora. It wound up on Fulgora in this run because that's where I originally put my quality factory. But next run, my quality factory will be on Volcanus. But the other reason why I think it's very advantageous to have your shipyard in Volcanus in the late game is Volcanus solar in orbit is very, very high, which means when you're jump starting a ship, you need very few solar panels in order to jumpstart it properly. Like when I jumpstart these in Fulgora orbit, I have to remove the lasers while I prime the fusion reactor. Otherwise, you know, the 2 solar panels isn't enough. Like those lasers will keep siphoning the power that should be going to this inserter, and yeah, like it winds up taking a lot longer to start up. So in Fulgora orbit, I remove the lasers, but if I had done these in Volcanus orbit, I probably wouldn't have to do that because the solar in Volcanus versus Fulgora is something like 5 times stronger. Or I can't remember. Nope, I was right. Yeah, exactly 5 times longer. So one thing you can do to alleviate that, if you do have your shipyard in Novice or Fulgora orbit, is launch some ice and calcite up from that planet and ghost insert them into the fuel makers in order to get it going. That will significantly shorten the amount of time it takes to get started. It's a bit annoying, but yeah, as I said, it only has to be done once when you're starting the ship, and then once the ship gets going, it will be fine forever, and it will never run out. Even if it has to idle over a planet for an extremely long time, I've never had a ship actually run out of fuel or asteroids or anything like that once it's actually been started. So there you have it. I believe that covers everything of these 2 designs, or completely beltless laser ship over here, and or a kilo ship, which still has 1 belt. We have some basic combinators covering the logic here. I don't think these require too much explanation. It's the same logic that I essentially use in all my ships, where we, on this one, it does recipe switching depending on what's actually needed. You know, for example, if I need calcite, it'll run the ice and calcite recipe. But if I only need ice, it'll only run ice, and everything shuts down if it doesn't need anything. This one's a lot simpler. The only combinator that's actually needed is the ice and calcite one, because this is always on metal and this is always on carbon, because I don't need sulfur for explosives or anything like that. We throw the extra chunks overboard. It simplifies things, but again, this is one of those things that also makes the ship longer to start up because it's throwing away those extra chunks. This one also does the same thing, because we have no asteroid belt, and unfortunately you can't insert asteroids back into collectors. If you could, that would be amazing and would make these designs much easier to start up, because you wouldn't be throwing away all those extra chunks, but unfortunately you can't do that. So yeah, this just has 1 combinator which just governs this and throws away whichever gets too high if the other ones are too low. So yeah, hopefully that covers everything. And I hope you guys enjoy these 2 ship designs. I think they are very, very optimized at this point, especially regarding Endgame. I've already seen, you know, a lot of other people start to imitate these designs. It's, I think, very hard to further improve these at this point. I've tried a bit, and yeah, they're kind of getting to the point where they're sort of plateauing as far as development goes, and there aren't really any major further improvements to make. They're already extremely space efficient, extremely compact, extremely fast, extremely UPS optimized. They're basically checking all the boxes. I'm quite happy with how these turned out, and consider them to be finished designs at this point. You can find both of them on the spreadsheet, and I hope you enjoy them. My name is Stupid Fat Hobbit. I stream at Twitch TV, SF Hobbit, and thanks for watching.